Is it time? It is. It's a little bit after. I'm sorry, we're a little late here. Town of Richmond meeting for the Water and Sewer Commission, Tuesday, January the 16th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. Any public comments? No public comments other than my public comment is it's a beautiful snow outside. A little slippery, so be careful. And even when you push the button across the street, don't trust the cars that are trying to slow down because one just slid right past me. Yeah, it's pretty scary. Anyway, okay. Additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda for tonight? No additions, deletions, or modifications. Okay, onward. Item number 3, approval of minutes, purchase orders, and warrants. So would anybody like to make a motion to accept the minutes from January 11th, 2024?
January 2nd.
Oh, how did that come up?
I don't know. I thought I heard you say 11.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Oh, that's the memo from tonight.
I'm sorry.
I sent it to you on the 11th. That's why you got that number there in front of you.
There you go. January 2nd, 2024. There we go. I stand corrected.
So this is Bard. Move to approve the minutes of January 2nd, 24.
This is Aaron. I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. Any corrections or comments? Being no further discussion. Holding the vote. All in favor of accepting the minutes from January 2nd, 2024, vote aye.
This is Aaron. I.
Bard, aye.
Morgan, aye. The motion passed. Oh, by the way, we do have a quorum tonight. Next up, warrants. We have 2 warrants. One is an electronic transfer warrant report for $30,713.26. And then the other is a check warrant report number 22111 in the amount of $35,332.60. Do I have a motion to approve the warrants as stated?
This is Jay. I move to approve the warrants as stated.
Have a second?
This is Aaron. I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? No further discussion. Asking for a vote on accepting the warrants as presented. All in favor, say aye.
This is Jay. Aye.
This is Aaron. I.
Bard, aye.
Morgan, aye. The motion passed to accept the minutes. And will you circulate those around by email or?
Yeah, I think it'll be easier just to send them out on DocuSign. So I'll do that tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And then you guys just check your emails. You can all sign it virtually and we'll be good.
Sounds great. Okay. Next up, we have items for discussion or presentation. First item up, which will be the bulk of our discussion tonight, is the review of the 60% report for the 20-year wastewater valuation discussion, moving forward with the preliminary engineering report and submittal to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund priority list. So I will let, who would like to take this?
Josh?
Josh?
Go ahead.
Sure. I guess I'll give a sort of a general overview, and I think Steve will be better about probably getting into some of the details, but this is the 60% report, and they sort of do these in stages. I think we reviewed the 20% a couple months ago. So the 60% report has more detail and more specific suggestions, as well as a draft budget. This is not finished. There's still time to make changes based on the recommendations, and I'll let Steve get into some of those details in a little bit. He has some thoughts on changes or just some things he needs some more clarity on. Really what we're doing right now as far as any sort of action is the Clean Water State Revolving Fund from the state as a priority list application that you have to get onto. It's open really once a year, so that was due today. In order to get onto that, we had to have our engineers submit for that list, and then that tees us up for funding in the future through CWSRF loans, which oftentimes have a subsidy and oftentimes have zero interest. We got on that list. We authorized them to submit that last week. So now we're on the list, but we still have a time to nail out the details. They're going to work on a preliminary engineering report, which is based on the 60% of the study. But as we look into things, as Steve reviews it, as the commission reviews it, we still have a chance to make changes before the review is finalized. I think Steve is looking at the timeline. There's still a few months in front of us before we get to a couple more drafts and then the final report. But getting on that list, even with the preliminary feedback from the report, is very critical, because if we want to do anything with funding, if we'd like to do anything with funding within the next year, being on that list is important to be able to go to a bond vote and then apply to the state for funding. But it doesn't lock us into exactly what they're evaluating there or what they recommended. At this point, maybe I'll pause for questions on process, and then we can let Steve kind of go into more of the details. Hoyle Tanner, unfortunately, was not able to send a representative tonight. Kirsten, who's been working on this, had another conflicting meeting. We'll talk to her about coming to the first meeting in February, because she'll be able to provide a lot more details. But Steve and I did have 2 meetings with her and her team last week to get more of an executive summary of this, which unfortunately it's a close to 600-page document. They did not provide an executive summary, but I think having her here in 3 weeks would be helpful. So I think if there's any more questions about sort of process, we can get to those, and then we'll get into some of the substance with Steve.
Bart? Morgan, just I thought it'd be worth like looking forward at sort of the timeline, what it looks like moving forward in terms of timing of engineering study, funding, all that kind of stuff, because it's kind of multiple parts. So maybe just at least in a broad brush, what we anticipate that kind of timeline to look like.
I mean, the next thing due is the 75%. And I believe that's not due. I might be wrong on this, but I don't believe it's due till around the 1st of April. And then I think there's a 90%, which is early summer. And then 100%, I think, is around September. But I'm not 100% on those dates. I couldn't get a hold of Kristen this afternoon.
But regardless, there's a few months in front of us of finalizing the study. And as far as funding, it's my understanding that we can kind of go in a few different directions. We can go for the entire thing, which is like $15 to $17 million, do a bond vote for that. Or it might make sense to sort of piece it up into smaller projects, addressing the most critical first, and then moving forward with those, and then sort of spreading this out over time. But let's say, for instance, we wanted to fund the influent pumps. We identified that as a critical piece. We wanted to do all 3 of those and the screen in front of those. And let's say we were ready to go to vote for that by November, when we have an election for a bond vote. Being on the priority list now allows us to get to that vote in November. If we were on the list now, we would not be able to do a bond vote until really next town meeting would be our next time. So it gives us the opportunity and option to move up to a bond vote as soon as we can, but not the requirement to do so. I guess it's not mandated. That's right. Do you have a question?
No, you're good. I was just seeing if Aaron or so. Yeah, so thinking of that, just for clarification, we've got this report in front of us. It's got a lot of, volumes of really good information to digest. No pun intended there. But let's say if we were just going to wait and start it all at once, when would we even start? We wouldn't.
I believe that they're not construction bid going out in 2025 is what they're looking at.
For the summer of 2020 or spring.
Well, it'd be the spring going out to bid. I don't even know if it would be until the 2026 construction season.
Okay, so we are a full 2+ years
Yeah.
out.
I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big project.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And, you know, really Josh and I, when we had this 60% meeting with the state and Holt Tanner, we both came away with it, I believe, very pressured to be in there into this pool of money or trying to get in there. Cause I was like, I can't make decisions on what processes we're changing here without doing some research and so, but the engineer assured us that, you know, none of this is set in stone until we get to that final 100%. Going forward, we have the ability to choose different processes, stick them in and see. That there's a low end, they kind of did a low end of, which was in the 15 million range, and then the higher end was up to the 17 million range with the different processes going forward. So, I mean, we really had to, both Josh and I, and that's why we had 2 other meetings with them, was to be reassured that, you know, we have time to do the research. That it's a big project and our treatment plant works. We have really good removal of nutrients and stuff that we don't need to screw it up. And I don't want to be responsible for screwing it up.
Right.
So I want to do the due diligence of doing the research, making sure that this stuff is the way we need to go into the future.
Okay, good. Bart?
So to be clear, that's kind of what I was looking for. This is a fairly long duration, like we're kind of in the first stage of a process that will take a while. And I'll make a general comment about grants and funding requests. There's asking for the money, there's being offered the money, and then you don't really accept the money till a final stage. Asking for it and being offered it are like the first stage, like the first stage and the second stage, and all the way till sort of signing up for the money, committing to a contract or an agreement is the very end. And there's no actual commitment until then. But as in many high cost projects like Regional Planning Commission, etc., start to finish, it's often 2+ years, and you just got to start at the beginning. So that's, I think, a good take home, I think.
And one other note on funding, I'm going to be having a follow-up meeting here soon with Hoyle Tanner about other funding sources. So CWSRF is just the state loan program. There are other grant programs out there that might be available to us to access. Hoyle Tanner would know what those are. So they proposed a fee to help us search those out, put together those applications. One thing they continue to stress is that because we're taking so much septage, the state is very interested in maintaining that volume, if not increasing it. So there will probably be money available that we can find from the state specifically related to septage. And Hoyle Tanner will help us with that. I'm hopeful that I can come back to the commission by the next meeting with a proposal from Hoyle Tanner on a project to help us find that funding.
Okay.
I believe that the dewatering I know they've said that all of the engineering costs involved in the dewatering and the septage end there is a program where there's money available to cover it 100%. That part of it. And I think there's other monies because we're such a large septage receiving station that there's some other monies out there that would go towards that end of the project.
I'm curious as to the interest is that there is a huge need for this,
Yeah.
and what is causing that need, or
Well, it's people building houses, that aren't on systems, and you've got to have a way of disposing of their waste also, and
right,
it has to go to a treatment facility.
right,
Really, there are very limited numbers. For our plant, the amount of septage we take in is tremendous.
Mm.
When I tell people that we take in what we take in, they're like, and it doesn't mess up your process? And I say, no, it does not mess up our process.
Properly designed.
It really does work.
Okay. Bart, go ahead.
Sorry, just one other brief comment. This, I think it's also illustrative that the legislature and others are looking at residential housing development within villages and towns where there is existing water and sewer. And it's related to what Steve just described to avoid this other problem. But to be clear, with new legislative regulatory obligations for things like accessory dwelling units, it is plausible to expect that there would be over time some increased infill and customers connected to the system within the parameters of the system service area.
We currently have one of those going on.
Other comments or questions or? Steve, would you like to add about the reports, concerns?
No, the report I felt was very comprehensive. They included everything. I did ask for a couple of modifications in the new design. In the new design, there was that old green building out behind the digester. That building would be taken away and the dewatering building would be extended. We essentially would lose any storage space on that lot. So we asked them if there was space there to include basically a 15-foot wide addition onto their addition that we could have as a bay, basically a bay where we could park the skid steer and have storage for some of the stuff that we currently need in storage. And they modified the plans to include that. And they did include basically a new as part of this, the collection system was included. Most of what is in there, that part of it, the manholes, part of the thing, was stuff that we need to do as far as cleaning them, and that's on us as a town. The two major things that they included were relocation or redesign of a new pump station on Bridge Street for pumping sewage across the bridge. And with that, there was also the relocation of our forced main, which is now completely fixed from the damage from the last flood. They would engineer it up high where the water line is, try to locate it out of the danger zone that it now hangs in. So, and that part of the project can be paid for by FEMA under the flood mitigation, or we can ask.
We could ask, yeah, it might qualify. We haven't asked yet.
But that's almost $2 million, that project alone.
The relocation of the pipe?
The relocation of the pipe and the redesign and possibility of moving the pump station out of the low spot.
So yeah, I think it was like about $1.25 million to $1.5 million.
Yeah,
Right.
almost 2 million with the pipe across.
Pipe as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
But those two projects I really think do need to get done at
Sure.
some point. I mean, we can survive the way we're going with it right now, but and modified, I now have a flood. When it starts to flood, we put a plug in and we just, shut the pump station off
Right.
and just let it flood over and bring it back online when we get done. But,
I thought you were gonna say you sandbagged all the way around.
no, I mean, part of what the design I would expect them to do if the pump station stays where it is would be a pump station with totally submersible pumps.
Right.
So that no matter whether the pumps get flooded or not, they're still gonna work. And it would not be the current, crawl down into the hole in the ground to fix things. Everything would be located above.
Oh, on a platform.
Yeah. And then the control panel would also be brought up above flood stages. I've actually seen some pictures of some that are being built right now in towns that had worse flooding than us. And they're literally building their control panels up with a set of stairs and
Not pallets?
and no, and a like a little deck area. But that is all located, so that it is above any flood damage that could occur.
Yeah, well, that would be well worth it, because it's not gonna.
No, I think, that part of it. The basic plant itself, they're not changing the process. It's basically staying a return activated sludge plant. They're not changing anything there as far as the basic design of the flow of what we do. It will be a 3-pump influent pump system. It will go to a draw fill, so it will, the pumps will shut off and then, they'll come on and draw down, shut off, come on and draw down. It's better cycling for the pumps. And they expect them to last longer and be less wear and tear on the internal parts of the pumps.
Works just like a sump. Then.
Basically, yeah. We have also included, and one of the more pricier parts is putting the rake screen in front of the influent pumps to protect them from all the debris and stuff that comes in. And I believe the one that we are looking at will remove a lot of the rags, and other things that come down through the system naturally. That part of the project is about $1.25 million. It requires putting basically a building on top of the wet well where we are. And the screen will sticks down into the influent pump channel, and basically it brings it up to the top. And then there is a dewatering press with it. So it basically ends up dry and puts it into a dumpster. Removing all that stuff that we currently,
Oh, they're like disposable,
everything,
washable.
yeah,
Mm,
whatever comes down.
okay,
That's protecting our pumps better.
right.
Then it's gonna go from there to the pumps, then into the headworks. That large, lakeside unit that is a combination grit screen and screen to take out the wipes and stuff that we have now. That unit goes away because it's basically worn out anyway. And they will design a pure grit screen to take out the grit in the sediment before it goes into so the headworks part gets split. One part of it's going before the pumps, and then the grit screen is still staying in to take out the gravel and the grit that's in the stuff. Then the biggest thing, and we talked about this earlier, is the way they want to mix our anoxic zone and our septage receiving tanks and our septage digester. They want to go from an aerated system to a compressed gas, which is, when I say compressed gas, it's just compressed air. They use the word gas because it lends better to the design. But it really is just, the way we aerate it now is a fine bubble, and there's a lot of oxygen transfer, and they want to change it to a simply just a mixing type. The bubble is very large when it comes up, and it's 100 PSI being released at the bottom of the tank, and it comes up and it just keeps your tank mixed. And I have had a lot of questions about this. We lose some ability to know what's going on in the plant unless you're physically there. We go from basically a blower for the digester, a blower for the aeration tanks, and individual mixers in the anoxic zone, to one compressor. Well, it's a pair of compressors, but they work in redundancy. But you go from having 3 different separate items working to do the job to just this compressor. And I have a lot of questions on if the compressor screws up or this valve bank that they have screws up. Now I don't have just one process in trouble. I have 3 processes in trouble going septic because they're not becoming mixed. So I have a lot of questions about that part of the plant. They're trying to assure me that these will work. The one other thing that scares me a little about this, we would be the first ones in Vermont converting to this process. I don't like being a guinea pig. I'm sorry to say. And that's one of my feelings. But I'm doing the research with them, and we're like I said, we're now on to, we've talked to the salesman. Now we're talking with the professor at UVM, and I want him to work me through why these tanks don't need the oxygen transfer. Because basically now, if we have sludge in our digester and I'm having problems with our press, if I shut the press off and I leave the sludge overnight and let it mix and be aerated, I can come in the next morning and it works fine. And they're telling me that I could shut that off at night and not mix it and it would still be fine. And I'm saying, I don't think so. So we have had some questions about that part. So we're working through, and that's one of the things I want to do. I want to make sure that we're not changing something and breaking something that's really working well. The blowers for the 2 big tanks, the fish tank and the aeration tank, the 2 blowers are in desperate need of upgrade. The way that they have been run is they actually suck out of the septage tanks. They suck their air, and that's been really corrosive to the inside of the blowers. And they feel that they're really, really, really in the stage of ready to fall apart. So they're going to upgrade those with new blowers. They would be sized just a little bit bigger. They would also manifold the piping so that we could actually operate both aeration tanks at the same time. If the town is expanding in the future and you need to operate both tanks at the same time, we currently can't do that in the configuration that we have with the smaller blowers. The clarifiers, oh, I forgot, I was going to bring the chain. The clarifiers are in pretty much good shape, although we've had a small breakdown with one of the drive chains. It's a nylon drive chain. It's 18 feet long. It wore out. And when I say wore out, there's a link round part that's like about this big. And it is smaller than my finger now. It has basically worn itself down and worn partially through the steel pin that keeps it in place. I'm in the process of sussing out, and it's my first price on it was $55 a foot. I've got it down to 19 now. So I've been doing the research, trying to find a good source for it. The clarifiers, they're gonna leave the same. The filter tanks, they're gonna leave the same, do some upgrades. Basically, their upgrading is change the backwash pumps and new filter cloths. We've already done that. We've got two brand new backwash pumps on the filter tanks. And I just got back one of the ones that we took off that Phil Laramie rebuilt. So we already have a spare on the shelf. So that part of the project, I feel pretty comfortable that we don't have to pay a lot to, I almost think we could take that out. There is an upgrade to the UV channel. The channel itself is staying the same. The lights are so much more efficient now. We're going from a 10 bank to an 8 bank. And basically that's cutting off, it'll be a better power savings with the same coverage. And that's pretty much the plant. The one other thing that they will be doing is on the outside where our discharge is, right in front of the building, where our pipe goes out to the river, they will actually be putting in a, it'll be a wet well. So the effluent will come out of the plant and go into this wet well. And the wet well will be designed with one pipe going to the river, and it'll have a backflow preventer in it. So when the river backs up, it will shut. And then when the wet well gets to a certain height, it'll have two submersible pumps, and they will energize a pressure pipe or a forced main to the river. That'll eliminate any of the current problems that we have with having to discharge over the fence, you know, just through with the sump pump that we have. It's a better design of what we basically have. It's putting everything out into the river.
So there will be a second pipe that is not installed now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just means having a backflow preventer put in what we have. And
Yeah.
then a backup, which says when that wet tank gets full.
Yeah, it's actually a pump. There are two submersible pumps that will pump the effluent out to the river.
No matter what the height of the river.
No matter what
is.
the height, it becomes a pressurized system.
Okay, like a grinder pump, so it's sort of.
It's pure clean water at that point. I mean, they're just two pumps,
Right,
you know.
I guess I think a grinder pump systems as they're forcing septic into sewer lines, but.
Yeah, I mean, this is really just water.
Right.
I mean, the stuff we put out to the river there's no solids, no anything in it.
How big will the wet well be?
I think it's 8 by 9 is what it will eliminate the ability for us to completely encircle the plant. Because it'll block off that access that we currently have.
Big enough to put a trout in?
No, but in talking with Efficiency Vermont, one of the things that we've talked about is the possibility of using the effluent well as a source for heat pumps.
Oh.
And getting our heat back into the plant out of something that we're just discarding out of the plant.
So they'll have like a radiator type of set of pipes
yeah,
in there.
Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about that, but I brought Efficiency Vermont in to go through the plant, and there's a lot of things that, going forward that we can implement, I think, to make the plant more efficient, way more efficient in its electrical use.
That's great.
And that's one of the things. It's not total electric because we use natural gas there, but, they think that there's some savings that we can get, for heating in the ventilating ends.
So would that be in conjunction with using a heat pump then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, a lot, that's a lot. What about stormwater or sewer covers for flooding?
That part, yeah, I mean, that is something I think it's not really covered in this.
Okay.
Everybody that I have talked to about it seems to be on board with it. It's just, when do we start and do we do it ourselves,
Right,
I
okay.
mean, we pick 5 covers a year and just build until we're there.
Mhm.
But that really wasn't included in the
Right.
project.
Okay. Bard?
So two things. Thanks. A quick comment on the covers. Thinking about if it's a hydraulic system with pressure, to be aware of unintended consequences like backing up into people's homes. That has actually happened to one of the neighbors on my street when there was a problem and it backed up into their house. Because essentially the pressure had nowhere to go, so it just goes back up. So the hydraulic sort of elevation and pressure is something to be aware of as we contemplate what we do to manhole covers. So the first thing related to the comment earlier about compressed air, beyond the engineers and sales and professors, it's the kind of thing that we might say, well, can we go see an installation of this in a similarly sized plant as opposed to just, the idea?
I have 5. I have 5 plants that I'm in the process of contacting the operators. None of them are located in the state, but yeah, I'm the type of person that wants to talk to somebody that's dealing with one of these systems, more than I want to talk to the professors or the salesmen. Huh?
The salesman.
Yeah. So yeah, they have given me 5 different plants of varying sizes. And I will be upfront, they seem to push one in particular, which puts that on the bottom of my list. And I go to the other 4 first. So yeah, I really do. I am going to do my due diligence on every aspect of this design to make sure that it works for us and, the town in the future. So yes, I expect to go visit Glens Falls treatment plant because they're one of the plants listed as having a compressed gas system.
Life has taught me the value of relying on tried and true versus the
Correct.
latest.
Somebody else has invented the wheel. And the first 4 guys that are pushing the round wheel the square wheel are not the ones I want to visit. So, yeah.
Jay, questions?
No, I'm glad that you're going to do the due diligence you're talking about because it sounds too good to be true in some respects.
It is, but if you break it down into little pieces here and you just try to get through each piece, it takes some time, but I think it's worth the time that I have to put into it. And Brad also is right along with me. He's like, our phosphorus removal at the plant is phenomenal. And we don't want to mess that up. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm also pleased by the state wants to do what it can to keep us as a high septage receiving facility. We'll probably need to get back to discussing what the rates should be because it always seems like we're not charging enough for what we do.
well, we've asked Holt Tanner to help us get a better handle on what it's costing us And they said that they were going to.
Yeah, so I think, so part of the study is an upgrade to the septic receiving area, so it would have ability to have a meter on it.
Yep.
It's gonna upgrade everything in there, actually might even take over the whole garage bay that you
Yeah.
have there to make it operate better. And then once we have everything in, they'll be able to look at the processes they talked about, the electricity, the machinery, even staff time in receiving septic. Look at sort of all the variable costs, as well as look at what we are gonna put in for capital at the front end, and then help us correctly price septic receiving on a payback schedule as well for the capital investment. So that, we asked that question specifically last week to make sure that they could help us with that, and this would get us there.
That's great. Aaron?
Yeah, I'm super excited at seeing how those numbers come out.
Right. Thank you. Aaron?
And I asked the question earlier, or when you sent the packet about like the Cliff's notes of what we're supposed to be reading. And I mean, in like all seriousness, if there's stuff that you want us to specifically look at with you, then I'm obviously more than happy to do so. I was overwhelmed because I was like, are we supposed to read this whole thing by Monday? But if there's stuff that you want us to look at, like, just tell us. I'm more than happy to read it. I just need the direction.
I mean, the biggest part that you really can skip over is the collection system information that's in there. You know, you don't need to know where every manhole is. We do know where every manhole is now. And they've assessed, you know, what's wrong with them and what needs to be done. I mean, that is just information for us. Basically, the collection system is in pretty good shape. There's just a few minor things that they would like to see done as far as cleaning them and doing other small things to them.
Collection meaning the septic?
No, collection is the manholes and the pipes connecting the manholes.
Okay, so. Okay.
Yeah. They basically, Holt Tanner sent an engineer out. They GPSed every manhole. They opened every manhole. They measured the height of the invert and the outlet on every one. And so we now have that all, and most of that information, all of that information is in the report, and that's a big part of it. That part of it is really just information for us. There was no one part of that report that said you need to upgrade this because there's a problem. The only two things were the pump station and then the line across the bridge. Basically, a part of the collection system that needs to be fixed.
Right. Do we have I'm just gonna call it like a GIS type of mapping
We have,
app or?
so Kendall had diamond maps started.
Okay.
There are, it is one of the mapping systems that can be used. There were two problems with the way some of the information was put in there. One, they used a simple tablet as a GPS locator. It is not exact enough for the coordinates. So I'll give you an example. If we went up to Cumberland Farms on the corner to locate their curb stop to shut off, they've got a water main break inside or something, you know, and they need to shut off their curb stop. In theory, I should be able to send one of my guys with the diamond maps and go up. He opens it up and he knows exactly where the location of their, it's a 25-foot circle. And it could be located anywhere in there. It wasn't pinpoint accurate enough. My understanding is all of the information that the engineers did are for the manholes are pinpoint accurate. The problem is that information can't be transferred to our diamond maps. They're not compatible. with the program that they use.
Okay,
So yeah, we do have one. It's not great. But we do try to use it.
okay, good. Other questions, comments? Guess we should move on to the few other things we have here. No more questions, Dave? No? Good. Well, I know that we've run over time a bit, but that's okay, because this is, we're gonna.
It's an important decision that we're gonna be forced with
In a
bringing to
process.
the town.
For the next 12 months at least, just trying to get to the point of what we're gonna do, so it's probably gonna be an agenda item quite often, isn't it? Good. Update on repair of wastewater line under the Street Bridge that was damaged in December.
So all seasons, they contracted with a company that put staging under the bridge. Then that took 3 or 4 days, then they've come in. We opted, instead of cutting a section out, they were able to heat the section that was damaged to bring it mostly back to its original shape. And then we just installed basically a big stainless steel band around, with a seal in it, a rubber seal. And we basically put that around the damaged section. And we felt that was a better alternative since the pipe hadn't ruptured. We really didn't feel like cutting it and having 2 joints out in the middle. I think it was a better alternative. They then replaced one of the hangers that was completely damaged and straightened as many as they could reach from the July flood from their scaffolding. And then they wrapped where the insulation was removed. They put strips of blue board in there, and then they filled around this as a spacer. And then they filled around the strips of blue board with expand foam. So it's all insulated back, sealed good with the steel sealing, just like the other. It's just nice and shiny where they did their work. So I feel really confident. The pipe looks good. It's hanging back. It's hanging back in good shape, and I think we're okay until we relocate.
There you go.
There we go.
I think this is the.
Either one. There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's the repair there's insulation inside the steel band.
No, there's a rubber inside the steel band. And so basically they hit the pipe with some torches to help as they put the steel band around it to get all the dings and dents out of it. And they brought it back pretty much to a round true. And the sag that was in it had over time, it had a pretty big sag in it. Over time, that sag had gone away. So there wasn't a lot that, it wasn't like the pipe, it kind of came back into its natural state.
Yeah.
So
What's the pipe made out of?
it's called yellow mine. It's, from what my understanding is, it's a type of PVC,
Okay.
but it is very flexible and forgiving. Used in bridge crossings a lot. What I was told, EJP Prescott, the pipe was chosen for this bridge crossing, then shipped to the company that insulated it, and then all that was brought to Richmond and put together. The far end of that, you can see one of the joints, the normal joints. And there's like a couple of rubber gaskets in there, and there's some forgiveness in expansion and contraction, so they feel that that's what happened with the sag, that it just naturally came back to where it was supposed to be. I was really impressed. It looked really good. I felt very comfortable after it got done.
Right, good.
So the only thing left is the company has to come and take their staging down.
Okay, good. Questions, comments? All right, next item is the water data review. Maybe we want to push that to the next meeting. I don't know.
No, I think we can.
No, we can talk
for
about
5
it.
minutes, yeah.
You know, I'll be right up front with you. Shortly after the flood, we installed the new fluoride pump. So the fluoride numbers have come back. We are struggling really hard to get our fluoride number back to the 7. We've got one more thing that we're gonna try. And then I'm at an end of it. I'm gonna have to get the state to come in. We're running the pump at a basically 90%. And the state's telling me you should only have to run that pump at like 60%. I feel that our fluoride, I checked the concentration in the fluoride mixture, and it should be good enough to give us that, but so we're basically gonna do what we did with the chlorine barrel. We're gonna take the fluoride, we're gonna dispose of it, and we're gonna start with a fresh batch. I just don't think the chlorine concentration that we're got right now is high enough to give, even though it tests it, I don't think it's high enough to give us the right number. So we're struggling with the number, but we're confident, I'm confident that we're gonna get it back.
Okay,
You want to touch on-
And if you want to talk about the chlorine numbers, the reasons that the chlorine numbers are down in December, they're still well above what the state wants us to have, but they are low. There was a large amount of sediment that had occurred in the chlorine tank. And we ran it down as low as we could. And then we disposed of all the chlorine, all the sediment, washed it all out. And then put it back in with fresh. Because basically chlorine's a liquid and there shouldn't be any sediment in it. So we've cleaned it all out, put it in fresh. It looks good. It's working good. And our chlorine numbers for the month of January are right there. So
great.
the ones that are bad are when we were doing the drawdown and getting rid of the chlorine barrel. But there's always been chlorine in the water. It's always been disinfected.
All right, thank you, Steve. And then last item, update on water service line inventory, our water meters. Do we want to go over that next time?
Sure, we don't really have a kind of an update right now.
We've got a meeting on Thursday for the service line inventory.
Service line, you and I talked about the end of this week, getting numbers for water meters
Yeah.
and finalizing that.
Yeah.
So, that's really the update. We hope to have more next week.
Okay,
Or in
good.
2 weeks.
So I will say one thing that we've had to do, and I told Josh this, our laboratory equipment that we have to do the monitoring for the state. We've had to order some. And I've actually found the PO when it was purchased. It's was purchased in 2003. And this is the pH meter. When I went to order just the probe for our meter, it is obsolete. They do not make it. So we've had to order a complete meter and the probe. And in doing the research, they now make one that we can do 2 functions with, which is beneficial for our, so I've had to order some new laboratory equipment just because ours is so old, I can't get replacement parts. And I'm afraid that it's not gonna last.
No.
And we will be in violation if we can't do our testing.
Okay, good. Thank you, Steve.
But I brought that to Josh and he said to just mention it to you guys.
Okay. No, that's good. Appreciate it. Agenda items for next meeting. We should.
20-year upgrade.
20-year. I think that should probably just be a standing item going forwards. Repairs. Well, we'll touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're just, basically it's repair as needed right now.
So, any Jay, Aaron, Bard, any agenda items for next meeting?
Just more about the 20-year study. I've only barely had a chance to look at it.
Right.
If I recall correctly, at some point we were due for information about tank inspection. So whenever that comes up.
Yeah, that hasn't been forgotten yet.
Okay, Aaron?
Is there anything that we should talk about before town meeting? That like would be being put forward at town meeting? You can think about it.
Not at this point.
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
the next big thing for water waste, that's a good question, but town meeting tends to be more focused on non-water wastewater items. Within the next month, we'll probably have a draft budget. The big sort of show for water wastewater is in May when the commission will approve the budget for the next fiscal year. So usually February, March, April, we start to build that budget, talk about that budget. That'll be our next big annual push.
Okay.
And then, of course, associated with that rates, the rate structure. So
Yep.
Yeah.
those things kind of go together.
But, yeah,
Okay, and we can always email in to Josh to add items to the agenda. So do I have a motion to close the meeting?
Mrs. David, so moved.
Have a
This
second?
is Jay second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This is Jay, I.
This is Aaron, I.
Bard, aye.
Morgan, aye. The meeting is adjourned.